In our political system of modern times, when there is so-called democracy with its own vote banks, etc., it would appear that the political parties are actually manipulating and strategizing in terms of capturing those vote banks with their sentiments of hate or love or whatever. Perhaps at the level of politics, that is justifiable because people feel about those issues strongly, and therefore those sentiments can be exploited politically. But when you come to power, when you are in government, when you are in administration, you cannot discriminate. The law and justice and court cannot discriminate one set of people against another. It has to be for everyone. And this has been always the case with all good polity, big empires, etc. that we know of. How is it that this Aurangzeb, despite everything, could rule for 50 years? And such a huge all-India empire, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh taken together. And more comfortably, perhaps Akbar, not so much Aurangzeb, because Aurangzeb really struggled. He struggled to conquer south, and in the process he also lost north in terms of the legitimacy of the imperial household. But other more stable kind of polity under Akbar, and even under Jahangir, or previously under Muhammad Tughlaq for 25 years, under Alauddin Khalji for another 20-25 years, or going backward in time, the Gupta period and the Mauryas, big empires and large territories, and many of these rulers ruled for 50 years. Now we doubt whether the most powerful political regime of our modern times will survive for 5 years or not, or whether it will survive and go on to get another term of 5 years. It is because of this perception that the state under such and such political party, such and such rulers are not just. If they are just seen to be just and non-discriminatory and following justice for everyone, there will be legitimacy of their practice and recognition, and therefore there will be no opposition. But if you put someone in power who is completely biased and partisan and prejudiced and have no respect for law and judiciary, then certainly he or she is going to do such a harakiri that they are going to kill him. So we know that big empires have happened in India over 3,000 years now, and they have been part of glorious history of our civilization, and they have done things. They have done things in a most legitimate manner with texts of political theory and law and justice, etc., governing principles, guiding them in such a way that they would not seem to be discriminatory. Certainly when there is an opposition to the state, there will be violence of a most aggressive nature, and that will be suppressed. That will be justification, the state's justification. Otherwise there will be anyone set of group will emerge and say that we want power and we want autonomy, and so then the state will collapse. So that I'm not justifying violence in different places, but state certainly will use violence to suppress any threat to his geography and political entity, etc. But in peaceful times, in terms of administration, governance, it has to be just, and it should not be seen to be biased or prejudiced in favor of one group, whether a majority, or seen to be partisan, pandering to a small minority group on the other side, if at all. There are often accusations about it, minority appeasement, or majoritarianism. Either way, this is not going to work. If a political party in power is seen to be appeasing a small group for whatever little votes they bring in for helping them come to power, it's not going to work, because the majority population would see that this is not just. Similarly, if the state is pandering to the whims and aggression of a majority, it will not last for a long time, because there will be only a small section of that majority which is going to get the license to do all kinds of violations, and violations cannot be tolerated for justified for long. So a political system has to be necessarily just and seen to be just, and seem to be doing something which is acceptable to a large spectrum of interests possible, which unfortunately did not happen in the Aurangzeb case. That Aurangzeb was seen eventually to be partisan, and Aurangzeb was seen to be using religion in the same manner in which modern day politicians use religion, justify for its action, and then forget about it. I don't know whether Aurangzeb has done anything for the cause of Sunni Islam of such a kind that it has left its legacy for 300 years now. Nothing, except that language, that if there is anything happening against Islam, we are going to suppress this. But which Islam and what kind of Islam, and was that only option, etc. So we are just coming around to this view that in terms of our modern day perception about past, certainly there is a lot of ignorance, and the past examples are arbitrarily, selectively taken out for justification of modern politics, etc., which is a wrong thing to do. The past has to be understood in its own context, and but we know historical legacies have always played a big role in the justification, in terms of identity politics or ideological contestations, etc., and they are often done very, very arbitrarily. So therefore at the same time, for different political interest groups, we would see that perception about Akbar would vary. As I said, that here in India, perhaps, yes, Akbar is something of an all-time hero for all sections of the, for Sikh tradition would say that till the time the protective umbrella of Akbar was there, our Sikh gurus were completely, at ease and etc. But as soon as that protective umbrella of Akbar was removed after his passing away, under Jahangir, one of the gurus was executed, martyred. So similarly, almost all traditions would say that, as I said, early 17th century perception about Akbar is among Muslims is very, very positive. That the fact is, towards the end he had reconciled. He never gave up, in terms of Islam. Din-e-Ilahi was nothing in terms of, some people say it was a palace club, etc. But not a new religion as such. Religion was to be quarantined. इबादत खाना में बैठ करके मज़हब की बात कीजिए और खुश रहिए, और आपको सब स्पेस दिया जा रहा है, आप बात कीजिए, और ज़्यादा आप सख्ती करेंगे, बदमाशी करेंगे तो आपको उठा के फिकवा दिया जाएगा. And we know that Badayuni has written this in his Muntakhab al-Tawarikh, that in one of these sessions was being chaired by Badayuni, and Akbar had instructed Badayuni that जो लोग सबसे ज़्यादा चिल्ला चिल्ली करेंगे उनको यहाँ से उठा के फेंकवा देना है. In the same sense in which we know that marshals are to be brought in and thrown away from the parliament, Lok Sabha or state assemblies when they indulge in violence of a terrible kind. So then Badayuni said that इस तरह से तो एक एक करके सबको उठा के फेंकवाना पड़ेगा, because सभी यहाँ पे चिल्ला-चिल्ली करते हैं. So which Akbar lied that So basically Akbar was able to handle these people, put them to their places. आपका मजहबी मामला है, अपने तक रखिए इसको, दूसरों पे थोपने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. And this is very, very important. अगर आप ये कहते हैं, और फिर how is it that one set of people is religious people are coming up with their ideas and new ideas and saying that this is applicable to everyone and Akbar must follow that and impose everyone and convert, etc. So this is certainly not acceptable. So Akbar certainly showed this, that all of you have the right to flourish. All of you have some patronage or the other coming from the emperor, revenue-free land grants. Go build a church, build a mosque, do things. Temple, pray for the success of the empire, pray for the general public, etc. Do some public weal, charity, etc. But if you come and tell us that we have to follow your religion and this religion has to be imposed on everyone, this is not acceptable. So this is something of the modern secular kind, though we know that it's too early for us to speak of secularism during that period. But early modern sensibilities of questioning what was given, and the religious control of things even in public, not only private matters but religious control, those things are beginning to happen. But then how is it that that thing has not happened in the Aurangzeb case? So we see that actually contrasting style of working, so in terms of preferences, so which would mean that basically it would boil down to one person working in a particular manner with a political theory available. The same political theory is available to another person and he is not using that political theory, is using something else, which is narrow perhaps, sectarian perhaps, and aggressively religious, of a particular kind. So therefore for all time our rulers have those whole things, all kinds of options available for them to justify their actions. Some work narrowly, some have a broad vision for themselves. Now, it is important for our rulers to have a broad vision, inclusive political practice, so that they can actually do things which will be remembered by all sections of the people in terms of a just kind of political approach. I mean, something like Sher Shah would have done, though, or Alauddin Khalji, Muhammad Tughlaq, no one can say that they were seen to be partisan, I mean, though all of them had some difficulties or the other. Sher Shah did not get much time, just so he spent some 30-40 years, struggling to build some space for themselves in terms of an empire or kingdom, etc. But he perishes within 5 years of his establishment of, a more undisputed kind of leadership, empire that he was creating. So it would therefore appear that rulers have to actually act in a responsible manner, in such a way that they are recognized in posterity as doing something justifiable, something good, and something of lasting, value. So recognize in posterity accordingly. But what is happening on the other side in terms of modern day perceptions of it is all political. It's all politics. It's nothing to do with knowledge production or an attempt to actually seriously understand what the history was like. It is just an attempt to use certain examples from the past and use the past as a weapon in the political struggle in the present. So some groups will need an Aurangzeb to show that how Aurangzeb has done all kinds of violations. The other group will also need an Aurangzeb to say that how Aurangzeb was able to actually do something for Islam. So for that group, Aurangzeb will be an Aurangzeb Rahmatullah Alayh. People will go and place ritual Sufi chadar on that and do Fatiha and Niyaz and Agarbatti and all that. So he will be a part of that pantheon. Even someone like Sultan Mahmud of Ghazna would also be identified as Rahmatullah Alayh because he's supposed to have worked for the cause of Islam. And what is that cause of Islam? He might have attacked certain temples, looted that property and desegregated. And for this group, it is a big thing that the infidels and their places of worship were attacked, and he wanted to establish Islam, which we know this was actually not the case. So for the other group, certainly those are violations which are completely unacceptable. But does it mean that we are going to take revenge for what happened in the past? So the other group wants to take revenge over what has happened in the past. That 1,000 years of slavery has to be corrected by another 1,000 years of reverse slavery. Certainly, which is completely irrational and can be unjustifiable and cannot be done. So these are the things which I think are important in terms of highlighting the knowledge, accurate understanding of what the past might have been like, and what are the modern day uses of that past. And modern day uses of that past are sometimes very, very unreasonably political, unreasonable, unjustifiable, and they are just catering to identity politics and different kinds of sectarian kind of ideologies, which are not justifiable, and therefore, as you know, that as I said previously, that and this will continue. But this will continue not in the sense of being an acceptable proposition for a long time. It can only be acceptable for pushed by one small group for a period of time when they are in power. There will be other people who will be coming up with a different interpretation, more examples to show that it was not exactly the same. So therefore, I would say that in terms of our Indian situation of diversity and plurality and a long history of civilizational achievements, we need that kind of broad-based political framework and platform of the kind that the big emperors have done for a stable political system, and taking care of economy and social relations are harmonious and identity politics are put to their places. Religious people have given their spaces where they have the freedom, etc. But these people are unleashed against one another, and violence, etc., and political anarchy. Certainly, this will not last. So our civilizational achievement shows that we will have to have a stable political power entity. It has to create a good condition of harmonious kind for social relations to, and people to coexist peacefully. And the economic situation has to be certainly taken cognizance of, which we know that for Aurangzeb it was a desperation, that North India there was nothing in terms of economy that needed some expansion. So where do you expand? You expand in Deccan or you expand in the Indian Ocean. In Deccan you have the Shiite sultanates, you also have the Marathas emerging in a big way, and you have also have the Portuguese controlling the entire coast. So how will the economy be managed? And in fact, in that sense, certainly regions economic are important. But a wise ruler, a good ruler with good policymakers and strategists and advisors can still make do. You know, but if it is just religious justification for wrongs, coming forward from the past or done in the present, is not going to work for long.